I'm sure you have all heard the story of the four siblings who were gathered together for a holiday meal. And as they were passing around the bread and the veggies, someone remarked on the pork roast, lovingly prepared as it always was, with one end cut off, just as their dad had always done when he was growing up. And I started arguing at the table about why it is exactly that you always cut off one end of a pork roast before you bake it, before putting it in the oven. And one sibling insisted that this is so that it cooks more evenly. And the others were saying, no, it is because so that more flavor gets absorbed as you're basting it. So finally, they decided to settle the dispute and get their dad on the phone. And they said, Dad, why did you always cut off the end of the roast before cooking it? Is it so it cooks more evenly, or is it to absorb the juices? And the dad said, we were really poor when we were growing up, and I just had the one crappy roasting pan. That was the only way to get the roast to fit. William Faulkner famously said, the past isn't dead, it's not even past. Which is to say, we are all of us born in the middle of a complex story that's been being told for a very long time. We're born into the tale of our ancestors, our parents, biological or adoptive, their parents, their communities, their culture, their circumstances. Quoting Kierkegaard from our opening words, we all meet ourselves on a ship already launched, a journey already underway. As we grow, we are inescapably marked and shaped by that inheritance in a myriad of ways, conscious and unconscious. And one of the tasks of becoming an adult is to begin to untangle that story so that we can learn to shape our own story, to disentangle the threads of our narrative from the larger narrative of those who came before. In the process, perhaps we can begin to identify the deep roots, the deep values of our history, those tales and traditions in which we would gladly be rooted. And what are the lessons that we have accidentally learned and repeated, from the quirky and harmless, like the cutting off of one end of the roast, to those from which we might better free ourselves. For example, go where your life takes you is a value that both I and my wife, Suzanne, have lived, having learned it from our families. And I only appreciated later in life how my mom's mother, my grandmother, had immigrated from Canada to the U.S. as a young woman to marry and to start a new family here. She was a first-generation immigrant. And then I learned that her father had immigrated from Scotland to Canada, also at a very young age, so that their family could make their future. And I appreciated how my mother's and father's siblings are spread all around the country, as are my own. And how growing up, I always expected, having grown up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I always just assumed that I would leave my hometown as early as I was able. It wasn't even a question of staying. That wasn't even a consideration. And so these are values that we have absorbed, and we have imparted them to our own children, who have already experienced some uprootedness in their own lives, which I won't get into because it's not my story to tell. And as we've gotten older, Suzanne and I have begun to sort of recognize and talk about these patterns of connection and disconnection that we see in our own lives and in our families' lives. And we recognize more and more that there's a value to that value, go where your life takes you, and there's also a cost to these patterns of connection and disconnection, of distance and spreading out. And we feel that cost a little more dearly every year, especially as our own children get older. So we try to be deliberate now to them about also modeling the importance of family closeness and connection over the lifetime. We preach to our daughters all of the time about sisterhood and being there for each other, and we encourage them to practice these values right now while they're still in proximity as like students and living at IU. Like if one of them is sick, we will call the others up and say, your sister is sick, like go take her medicine, take her crackers and soup, go care for each other. And I'm sure it annoys them more than a little. But the point is, everyone is born into these family patterns. And when we're aware of them, we can better choose how to live into them, or live with them, or live around them, as the case may be. Family is where we learn how to do family. Are there any parents in the room by any chance? Anyone currently raising kids or formerly raised kids? Show of hands if you've ever said something to one of the kids and immediately thought, wow, I sounded just like my dad. Or I sounded just like my mom. How did you feel when that happened? Like proud? I'm a chip off of the old block. Mortified? Like I never thought those words would come out of my mouth. A little of both? By the way, this is a marriage pro tip. There's never a good time to say to your spouse or partner, wow, you sounded just like your mother just then. Learn from me so you don't have to. Our identities are so shaped by our families, there can be this push-pull, right? Push-pull. We feel a gratifying sense of continuity in seeing our place in the generational line and a deeper visibility and an understanding of the parts of ourselves when we can connect to that which came before. So that's where my temper comes from, or so that's why I'm reticent, right? I see the patterns in the family. But at the same time, we want to individuate ourselves, and we don't necessarily just want to repeat all of these patterns of the past. Family is where we learn what the definition of family even is, and this has a really strong cultural component. Some cultures tend to very narrowly define family as like close blood relatives, and they're very focused on the nuclear family. That's what's familiar to me as a Midwestern German person. Other cultures tend to be much more expansive, and they incorporate into the concept of family more distant blood relatives, or even close friends, or anyone who's made a commitment to the group with their constant presence and their faithful care. So the word cousin in many families is used much more broadly than just to denote blood relations. Any honored old family acquaintance might become an aunt or an uncle. Some cultures, for example, some Asian cultures, include in the family everyone living and dead who has ever been a part of the family. And these honored ancestors may be given a voice in current family decisions in the same way as the living have a voice. Some cultures are very forward-thinking in their conception of family, and they pay close attention to the impact of their decisions on ancestors who are not yet born. For example, David Wilkins, a citizen of the Lumbee Nation and a professor of American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota, says we ought to tend to 7 generations: the 3 who came before us, the current generation, and the 3 who will follow. So looking backward, we care for, honor, and tend the memory and the stories going back to our great-grandparents. And looking forward, we act with wisdom, care, and forethought towards our great-grandchildren. This seems eminently balanced and sensible to me, and so I offer it for your consideration. I can tell you that learning the stories of my own great-grandparents, which I'm just beginning to do, has been really illuminating and nourishing for my own spirit. Also, our families are an unchosen tribe. So I want to acknowledge that sometimes the full development of our personality and our person can only happen in the context of a chosen tribe. Our friends or the group of people that we find and call our own on purpose. Not everyone has a family that's supportive and nurturing and so on. Or our families can be nurturing in some respects and stifling in other respects. Sometimes our friends are the first people to tell us that we are beautiful without judgment or expectation in a way that we can actually hear it for the first time. So I want to hold up the importance of the chosen tribe for people. Also, some people are living with a legacy of disruption from their ancestors, particularly people who were brought to this country as enslaved people, native people who having been removed from their land, were removed from their cultures as children and Christianized. Right? That is also part of the American story. And so it can be an especially spiritually urgent question to identify and reconnect to the ancestors when possible, or to create a new family and a new lineage when that connection is not possible. So the concept of spiritual ancestor is extremely important. Now we're entering a time of year that generally involves a lot of family gatherings. And that can be great, and that can be complicated, right? You might want to do a little bit of pre-holiday prep work, reflecting on your place within the family tradition. And what has it given to you, and how has it shaped you? If you're a journaler, you might want to do a little journaling. You might set aside time to trade memories with a relative or a partner or a friend and ask each other questions to bring the remembering to a deeper place. In remembering, we might recall the simple acts of kindness and generosity, hugs and kisses, shared wisdom, shared meals, shared laughter. You can ask yourself, what are the most important things I learned from my family? We may come to better appreciate our own strengths by appreciating their roots. And then what are the lessons that were not so great, that have not stood the test of time? We may better appreciate our own failings and foibles by seeing where we learned them. And this can be a step towards releasing ourselves from their grasp. Undoubtedly, if we look carefully at our family history, we'll find good things, we'll find bad things. We may see patterns of behavior that made sense in an earlier context that no longer serve us. We may see patterns of behavior that cannot possibly have served anyone, anywhere, anytime, right? All families are the inheritors of human failings. So all families have their share of bad stories, of tragedies, of secrets. We might have a complicated relationship with our family history. But whether our relationship to our family is straightforward and positive or complicated and mixed, we may yet find that connecting to our ancestors' stories can be an opportunity to tap deep wells of gratitude. We may encounter people who took great risks to build a better life for their family, like my grandfather moving from Scotland or Canada to Scotland, my great-grandfather, which is now our better life. Right? We may meet people who bucked the conventional wisdom or the easy complacency of their time, who made their own way, who thus helped open doors for us. We may meet people who endured the most difficult of circumstances, who fought for their right to a future which has now become our present. Honoring our ancestors means understanding and naming and owning the full complexity of their humanity, their gifts, their frailties, including the way in which these gifts and these frailties live on in ourselves. In the spirit of love and the spirit of peace, may we honor the memory of our ancestors. May we honor their unique strengths, talents, quirks, and capabilities, many of which we see in ourselves. Their bodies are gone, but we are the continuation of their bodies. May we honor with gratitude the gifts they have given us, the sacrifices they have made, the work done, the pleasures deferred. May we be wise stewards of the treasures that they have passed down to us. The time of their work has passed, but we are the continuation of their striving. May we honor their wisdom. May we remember their lessons, the hard-won truth of their experience, the knowledge accumulated over many lifetimes. Their time for speaking is past, but their words live on in us and through us. May we honor with humility their failings. They were people like us, imperfect, frail, subject to the shortcomings of their own time and their own upbringings. We ask for their compassion, for their humanity, knowing that we will fail in turn. We ask for relief for our own hurts. We ask for healing. We ask for release from the cycles of trauma that exist in all families. May we honor with courage their hope for the future, their vision for a better world which has been entrusted now to us. We are not bound by the particulars of that vision, but may we be worthy of its spirit. Their time for dreaming is past, but we are the living embodiment of their dreams. In remembering our ancestors' dreams, their strengths, their gifts to us, and their sacrifices, may we come to a deeper place of faith in our own gifts and our own capacities, and a deeper determination to build a better world for the next generation. Blessed be, and amen.